Hi, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss. It is August 13th today, and I'm sitting down to discuss some of the astrology that is prevalent right now, as well as some of the astrology that is to come over the course of the next few weeks. In particular, today, I'm going to be focusing on the entrance of Mars back into Capricorn. It is retrograded back into Capricorn as of last night. So we'll take a look at what does it mean that Mars will be retrograde back into Capricorn for a while now, and all the way up until, let's see, September 10th, 11th. Mars is going to be hanging out in Capricorn again, its place of its exaltation. So that's an important thing to take note of. Saturn is going to be in a sort of trine to Uranus for a good while, and the element of Earth is about to be all over the place. I'll talk about that, but we got the sun heading toward Virgo, and then we've got Saturn and Uranus in Earth signs, Taurus and Capricorn, Mars back in an Earth sign, Capricorn, and we'll see Mercury entering Virgo in early September as well. So a big earthy turn is coming. So I kind of wanted to focus generally today on these three things: Mars back in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, trine Uranus in Taurus, and the proliferation of the element of Earth that's about to come through. So that's what we're going to focus on. So first of all, Mars has been retrograde in Aquarius since late June. It's been in Aquarius since middle of May. So we've been with Mars in Aquarius for a long time now, and it's not going to be too long that people start to feel the difference, you might say, the subtle difference of Mars being in Capricorn. The sky is reflecting different kinds of states that are always changing in the material world, and they're complex, beyond what most of our minds can comprehend. If you've ever tried to read any little piece of traditional Sankhya philosophy from India, for example, you'll see that the way that even ancient philosophers were thinking about the interaction of material elements constantly creating the fluctuations of material changes in the world was incredibly complex. And so I've actually been reading a book lately called Sankhya and Science, and it's just fascinating. But the astrology is not, as I've said many times, you don't think of Mars as literally causing, in some very linear sense, everything to happen. Think of Mars as reflecting a complex state of changes that are happening that can be felt, especially if you train yourself to notice and feel subtle changes in your body and the environment, etc. So Mars making its return to Capricorn is the place of its exaltation. Why is it said that Mars is exalted in Capricorn? Because this is the sign that begins the winter season. And winter is the place of maximal darkness. And Mars, as a traditional malefic, was associated with death, was what was called a killing planet. So you have the Lord of Death gets really empowered at the beginning of winter. Now that might sound a little ominous or heavy, but we all know that that has a range of applications, actually. So the Lord of War, the god of war, Mars, can be associated with bravery and being valiant or courageous, facing fears, taking risks, fighting things in the world that one should fight. So there's lots of good things about Mars, but empowered in the first sign of winter, the place where death is at its strongest, you might say, the darkness is deepest. And so it's a powerful place for Mars, very productive sign for Mars to be in. If you think of Capricorn being the temple of Saturn, then there's a special wing that's devoted to sort of like worship of Mars within the temple. So a very productive Mars right now, which means look at the house of Capricorn, the whole sign house of Capricorn. Look at those late degrees of Capricorn in your birth chart. In that house, the topics of that house, you may see a little extra giddy up in that area of your life right now. However, and this is also very important, the planet's still retrograde, which also means that the subjects of revision, reflection, reversals of fortune or changes, prohibitions, or time periods of delay, or having to go backward and when you'd rather be going forward. All of that stuff still applies, but now the topics have switched a bit in our charts. So, you want to immediately look at your chart and say, okay, there's a little shift of topic here with Mars retrograde. I might see a slightly different area of my life being in the spotlight from this Mars retrograde. So, however, we have to also take into consideration that an exalted Mars retrograde is very different from a retrograde Mars without essential dignity in Aquarius. Not that, one's better than the other in some simple-minded way or anything like that, but an exalted Mars in particular refers to peak states of fortune. So the exaltations were intimately, from the standpoint of ancient astrology, the exaltations were intimately related to the moon. The entire doctrine of their meanings in some ways is sort of laced into the meaning of the moon as the ruler of the realm of fortune, of the realm of coming to be and passing away, of change and transformation in the material world. So all of the exaltations have to do, in a sense, with peaks of fortune where things go up really to lofty, elevated places. But what's the opposite? A fall. When you take Mars and place it in the polar opposite sign of Cancer, it's said to be in its fall or depression. So everything that goes up in this material world must come down. So what does that mean? It means that there is actually an opportunity right now to examine things in your life that you have held on high, and to potentially get out in front of yourself before you take a fall. Let me give you a very simple example. I had a client that I was working with, and we're just today we're talking about examining family karma and family patterns where things might be very, very successful at a very high level, but then deteriorate, decline, fall apart, not work out as well as one had expected. And one of the messages she said is, does that mean that's going to happen to me just over and over again? Whatever's successful in my life, really successful, is just going to fall flat on its face. And I said, well, exaltations are like warnings in a sense in the chart. Exaltations are omens of the potential to fall on one's face if one gets too attached to high elevated forms of status or success or desire or what have you. So we still have some choice, right? So I said to her, no, you don't have to repeat this pattern. As far as I'm concerned, you have free will, but you should be aware of that pattern, especially since it's already played out in your life and family karma and history and things like that. To be sure that you don't repeat that potential pattern, one would want to pay attention to where in one's life one is becoming puffed up or proud or excessively desirous, or where one has any superficial level of expectation for oneself or others or whatever that's just too high and can't be sustained over a long period of time. So when you look at Mars retrograde in Capricorn, not only looking at the topics of your chart that are ruled by Capricorn or in those late degrees of Capricorn in some house, but also looking in general at where you might be excessively proud or puffed up or too high on yourself or whatever. It's a great moment to see it clearly and to become humble. When we become humble with an exaltation, in a sense, the exaltation goes from potential vanity to virtue. So one of the great things about an exaltation is that exaltations also have the potential to bring out some of the highest virtues of planets in terms of their own natural archetypes. For example, Mars in Capricorn can be about the virtues of hard work and seeing something through to completion, especially things that are of a noble character or noble quality. So you feel called to do something good in the world. An exaltation can give you all of the greatest qualities to be able to accomplish truly virtuous things in the world. That's sort of what exalted planets are capable of. But on the other hand, again, William Lilly, sort of famously in his textbook on horary astrology called Christian Astrology, he sort of points out that exalted planets are often associated with people or situations that are sort of overestimating themselves, that are puffed up or proud or too high. And of course, the opposite again is a fall. So that's some general advice for Mars retrograde in Capricorn, which is there. Mars retrograde in Capricorn all the way till the end of the month, 27th or 28th, before Mars turns direct again. But we'll be in Capricorn direct after the 27th and 28th, all the way until roughly the 10th or 11th of September, when it finally enters Aquarius again. So between now and September 10th or 11th, there's a nice window to have a much more productive Mars, but also to continue the evaluation and reflection of a Mars retrograde, but doing so in a way, especially that looks at things that are too proud, too puffed up. Your expectations are too high, you're overestimating yourself or someone or something, and you can start to pull back from it if you need to. That's very important. So, for example, someone right now were to come in, let's say they ask a horary question and they say, should I make this investment? I'm really excited about it. It's a new form of cryptocurrency or something like that. You would say, let's say that the signifier of money was Mars in Capricorn, exalted but retrograde. A very simple diagnosis of the situation would be like, okay, you're overestimating the potential here, and that you need to check your expectations and bring them back down to earth. In which case, you can embody the best qualities of that the Mars in Capricorn, which would be conservative, a more conservative, grounded, careful, and methodical way of moving forward. There can still be a lot of success, but the caution of the earthy kind of caution of Capricorn can be really elevating the Mars-like qualities to their highest level. So you think of a knight or a warrior or something, a soldier or something like that. You think of one of the, what's the saying? Something about discretion and valor. Discretion is the better part of valor or something like that. But the basic idea is that one of the classic sort of chivalrous warrior-like qualities is being decisive and patient at the same time. Right? So the weak warrior is the one who just flails about wildly, whereas the one who has can exercise a little bit more constraint and can conserve their energy, pick their moments, pick their battles. Those are often the ones that we admire the most, that we say has the most virtuous qualities. So we can bring the most virtuous qualities out of Mars right now by trying to embody those kinds of things. Caution. You can be forward and ambitious, blending it with checking expectations that are too high and being sort of slow and careful in terms of whatever you're trying to move forward with right now. All right, so those are a few things to think about with Mars retrograding in Capricorn now. Again, it will turn direct on the 27th or 28th of August. When a planet turns direct, it's as though the momentum is changing. So sometimes a planet turning direct can be compared to a time where a person, for example, a person who's been run down or getting sick or dealing with delays or blockages will suddenly start feeling better, or the prohibitions are lifted and you can start moving forward with ease again, stuff like that. Other times the retrograde process will tell us that you've been reflecting on things and you've been reconsidering, revising, trying to make changes perhaps to some area of your life. The retrograde comes to an end, turns direct, very slowly, piece by piece. Now you start implementing those changes. You start seeing the fallout from the transformations of circumstances that occurred during the retrograde period. There's a carryover or implementation time, and that usually lasts for maybe I usually notice it with Mercury retrogrades, for example, for like a week. A Mars retrograde's a lot longer than a Mercury retrograde. Probably give it a few weeks to watch Mars move forward again, gain speed, start picking up and You might start to feel like a period of frustration, especially with Mars being a planet that's associated with our will. A planet of frustration may become, or a period of frustration may be nearing an end or turning around, something like that. The sun is going to enter Virgo August 22nd or 23rd, not long before Mars turns direct. Mercury will turn direct on August 20th, right? And then Mercury will enter Virgo on September 6th, Mars in Capricorn all the way till September 10th. So suddenly, in addition to, I haven't even started talking about this yet, but Saturn is also trine to Uranus, both in Earth signs. This means that there's just an abundance of Earth energy coming through right now. What does that mean? Well, okay, you could talk about Earth all you want, but you always have to contextualize when there's an appearance of something in astrology in numbers, right? Like, okay, all of a sudden everything's entering Earth. You always have to look at what the sun is doing, because everything is also expressing itself through the medium, the centrality that the sun is given in the tropical zodiac. So all of these changes are, for example, into Earth that we're seeing, or a lot of emphasis on Earth, is happening right as the change of season is occurring into the autumn. So you have the double-bodied sign of Virgo as a kind of baseline of our interpretation. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we're on the brink of autumn, and it means the double-bodied time of year, whether any of the four double-bodied signs represent cusps between the seasons. And wherever you are in the world, if you're using this language of astrology, you're talking about a time where there is a duality of qualities sort of in the psychic space. The duality of qualities in Virgo have to do with the end of the light or yang time of year and the entrance into the yin time of year. So once we hit the fall equinox of Libra, after Virgo season is done, right around September 20th or so, you'll see the darkness take over, and from Libra all the way to Aries, now we will be in the time of year where there is more darkness than light during the 24-hour period. So you're thinking of the death of summer and the beginning of autumn, a dual quality of summer and autumn starting to blend and mingle with one another, coming up shortly. And as that's happening, there's so much Earth. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, first of all, one of the simplest ways of looking at a change like that is in terms of preparation for death, preparation for loss, preparation for the dark time of year, for preparation for going inward, preparation for going into the underworld. The Earth signs are practical at the end of the day. They are related to, like, for example, something I know a lot about from having like little ones is that, for example, if you give kids a lot of dairy, my daughter anyway, she will tend to get constipated. So it's the heavier, earthier things, for example, bind. So Earth, you could think of Earth as like a binding agent in your diet that can make your digestive tract heavier. It can bind things together, make it, and so, but the whole point of that is just to say that Earth tends to bind things together and make practical and make solid. And so because we're entering into the dark half of year, a whole bunch of Earth is emerging, and we're sort of preparing for that during Virgo season. You could say that there are practical changes that have to be made in order to surrender something or to let go of something and maybe pave the way for something new. So in a just a broad sense, you could say that there's a kind of needing to clear space for something new in your life potentially. And what's the big, long, practical to-do list of activities or things that you need to get done to make sure that this transformation happens as smoothly as possible. Now, there's more I'm going to say with Uranus and Saturn getting together right now, but that's a very basic thing to think about, is like all these planets entering Earth signs, and the sun entering an Earth sign as the light of the summer is dying, so to speak, and autumn is underway. You're thinking about, okay, I'm trying to finish something. I'm trying to and finish things and prepare for a change, and I have to do that in ways that are very practical. Earth likes things that are measurable and very solid. So there's a good vibe like that in the air. Now, when you pair that with the fact that Mars has been retrograde, all of these planets are retrograde, and Mercury is retrograde, and that the Virgo energy comes through right as Mercury turns direct, and then Mars turns direct and everything, you also get the sense of needing to practically implement changes that have been building or occurring over the entire summer. So again, these retrogrades have been in effect for a long time. Mars all the way back to late June. Mercury, has been going for a while now. So you get this feeling that there's substantive things to do, and I'm ready to get them done. You can feel the momentum building to need to suddenly disperse our energy in lots of different directions to take care of things, and again, just cross things off the list and prepare the ground for a more total transformation represented by the entrance into the fall equinox that's coming. The fall equinox is like a judgment moment. The soul is judged in the underworld, right? It goes, you die, there's a judgment, you're reborn according to your karma, like this. This is the general story. And the fall equinox represents a harvesting moment. And so we're also, in many ways, what we're also trying to do is cut out what's excessive. Elimination is a big theme right now coming into the fall equinox. So eliminating things, and also being aware that we are more critical of ourselves right now. We're evaluating where we're at and where things need to be. Are they where they should be? And that kind of voice that you're hearing, the need to do something practical to get measurable results so that things are where they should be. And we almost sometimes we feel like, there's an imaginary deadline in our heads, but that's not imaginary. It's actually the forces of nature that are just working on us all the time, that, make animals prepare and hibernate for the winter. It's the same kind of idea, but we're ready to make substantive changes. And with the retrogrades, everything turning direct, the implementation period will be potentially very fast, effective, hardworking, and practical and demonstrable. So you got all of that push coming pretty shortly. So just to go back over the timeline, Mars turns direct 27th to 28th, Mercury direct on the 20th, Sun enters Virgo on the 22nd, 23rd. Mars is in Capricorn until September 10th, 11th. Then we'll go back into Aquarius. Mercury enters Virgo on the 6th. And then we have Saturn and Uranus also in Earth signs. So you can feel that practical kind of energy coming through. So I'll throw a fun question out to people in the audience right now, because I'd love to hear from you guys. Anybody feeling this, and how or where in your life are you seeing these energies right now? Or, what kinds of changes or work or to-do lists do you have right now that you're anticipating, or what kinds of things are you going to be implementing? Put some answers in the chat box. I'd love to read them and just share so that we can all witness the astrology in action. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is the fact that we have Uranus in Taurus and Saturn in a pretty close trine with Uranus right now. This is also sort of fueling the entire process and is a very important part of the astrology of the next month or so. The reason for this is that you have very conservative sort of Saturn. You have a planet that likes to maintain structures and discipline and keep good boundaries and fix things, and generally likes to conserve rather than change. So you have that energy in a trine, which is usually considered very beneficial, harmonious, growth-oriented. It's of the nature of Jupiter. And this trine is with Uranus, who is, Uranus is, of course, related to breaking boundaries, limitations, structures, barriers, is associated with things that are rebellious, defiant, eccentric, original, like that. Okay, so how in the world do these two planets get along, and how do you construct how do you think of a positive or beneficial relationship between Saturn and Uranus potentially, or very productive relationship with the trine that's happening between them. So the word that I like for a Uranus-Saturn trine is conservative empowerment. So Uranus is saying something needs to change. It's got to be tangible. It's got to be solid. It's got to change the way that you do things very practically, like how much time or energy or money or resources do you have or spend or waste or hold. It has to be related to things like quality of life, the way your material, physical surroundings look or feel. So Uranus and Taurus wants to make substantive, radical changes to the material situation, so tangible changes. This demands that kind of realness, real change. Saturn, on the other hand, is all about conserving things, even if they're miserable potentially, right? Or at its best is about helping to fortify something or give something structure or solidity. So when you put them together, what we're talking about is the ability to make sweeping, comprehensive, systematic changes that are very practical. So that's like the underlying tenor of this moment. That's also a big part of this earthy push that's about to come through. I want to make changes. They need to be comprehensive. Again, they need to be sweeping, systemic, and I need to set up my life or my situation in a totally different way. Like that's kind of the vibe. But that's very macro. You could bring it down to a micro level and suggest that something might be changing for your spouse that's like that, or something might be changing in your living situation that's like that, or in the workplace, or with one of your kids, or with your health, or with your relationship to something that you study or practice. But the idea of a creative and original impulse, even if it's a little outside of the box, I want to do things way differently than I've been doing them. It's not just theoretical with Taurus, right? It's got to be substantive. So I'm going to change the way I practice astrology. I'm going to change the way my work schedule looks. I'm going to change the way I spend my time, or the way I conserve my energy, or the way I do my payment structures, or like that. These are the kinds of and I'm going to come up with a way that's really original and inventive and gives me a lot more time and energy, or makes a lot more money, or so like the cryptocurrency thing, for example, is a big, very Uranus and Taurus. Okay. But in order to do that, in order to make those kinds of sort of sweeping changes, I have to do a total overhaul. It's sort of like remodeling a house, or it's like a mountain of tasks that one by one will get the overall system update completed. So you think about the momentum of everything that's been happening over the summer, is the momentum that's been building behind it. But I'm telling you, once the end of this month comes through with Uranus trine Saturn, and all of this energy coming up in earth signs, and Mars turning direct in an exalted Capricorn like this, and the Sun in Virgo, the swift desire to enact substantive, systematic changes will be really intense. And the advice for that I've been giving myself, because I can feel it coming up inside of me already, and that I've been talking about with some of my clients, is don't rush to completion. You'll have about a month. You're going to have like 4 weeks or so. Make a list of how to enact all of the changes that you want, the substantive, practical changes. And don't try to do them all at once, but break them into manageable portions. Figure out where you can delegate or get help from others. Take your time. Allow for some organic response from the environment as you're making the changes that you want to make. Because the other thing that's kind of tricky with Earth is that Earth, one of the ways that I've heard Earth talked about that I really like is, Earth wants to conform. Earth will conform to the way that we shape it with our will. So Earth's natural tendency is to conform and take shape. So the desire to make things take shape is going to be really strong. But we need a little bit of water to the mix, you could say, right? So a little bit of water is listening, feeling, sensing, intuiting how and where to mold and shape things, so that the change is not reflective of the urgency to change, but that the changes become something that is actually useful and satisfying to us on emotional, spiritual levels, because Earth will get things done. But that, it's sort of like you pay someone to come to your house and do a job, and you want it done that day, and you don't take any time to research or have a few competing quotes or get to know a few different workers or something like that, read their profile reviews online or what have you. The job might get done, but it might get done in a way that also, tracks mud all over your house, or, breaks something else in the process. We've all had that kind of experience when you rush too quickly to just get it done. So you got to be very careful with that, because this Uranus Saturn will want to formalize sweeping changes, and it will be methodical and effective, and it can do it. And the desire to get that done because of the feeling of being on the precipice of a change, a transformation signified by the entrance into autumn. This is, for some of us, it's subtle. It's not a big deal. So I'm kind of exaggerating it right now. Some of us, this is a subtler thing. For others of us, it will be more gross and big. But in either case, you just know that, you have some agency here. You're not just getting pushed along by the forces of nature. You can interact with these forces in a way that is more intelligent and conscious. That way you can, again, think of the element of water, the sensitivity, the listening, the carefulness. That's going to help utilize these earthy energies in a way that's not just like implement. It's just robotic or mechanic, and then it gets something done, but you don't really feel great about it afterward. So those are things to think about. I'm going to go up and read what some people were saying up here. It's been, let's see, trying to hammer out a long-standing court dispute. Yeah, there you go. It's sort of like the back and forth, and the feeling of like reaching a place where like, let's start moving forward again. Let's enact let's enact the conclusion. Let's enact the resolution of this thing. Let's, that feeling is building right now. This is a perfect example. Linda says, selling off a dishwasher, which I don't need, to replace with a freezer for the produce I've grown this summer. Okay, so there's kind of a timeline there. You're trying to get something done to implement something else. There's a timeline that's sensitive with the actual produce. Yeah, and the feeling of like, all right, let's move this thing. Let's do it. That's a simple example, a very good one. Betty says, annual for Jewish high holy days in the autumn, taking account of the past year, making peace with self and others, getting ready for the fall harvest and celebration. Right. Every year we experience this kind of change where we, fall cleaning kind of energy comes in, or preparation for the harvest moment, it is happening for us metaphorically all over the place. It's just amplified right now by an exalted Mars in an earth sign, and the Uranus Saturn trine in earth signs as well. So the feeling of being on the edge of an important change or shift that you have to implement practically, a little bit stronger more than usual. Feeling like forward momentum is finally coming. I'm ending some things and making time for others I want to do, which reallocates some money to different things. Yeah, exactly. And my point in that case like that, Sharon, would be like, be careful with the planets turning direct toward the end of the month. Give it a little bit of time. Don't rush anything, because really, from the full moon of this month all the way into like mid-September, there's a period of time where things may start to implement little by little in a more natural and organic way. Especially tempting to rush it when Mars hits exaltation and is still retrograde. So anyway, let's see. Laser focus on book on my journey through political corruption in Philadelphia that started in 2006. Finish up old, building new. Okay, so there's a literary process happening for Margaret. Beautiful. Yeah, I have a friend two friends actually, who are finalizing revision processes in a book. And, we've joked when we've hung out, like it's, not near my wife, who probably would not have appreciated this. It's like being pregnant when you're writing something. My wife can attest to you that it's a little different being actually pregnant. She gave birth on July 30th. So, but this is true. It's like, it feels like you're maybe a better analogy as a writer myself who's written a book is it's like at the very end, it feels like you're you're trying to, it's like you're trying to go to the bathroom and it's like a little painful, but it needs to get out, It's like creative process, it can be like that. So, but yeah, don't rush to completion. Here, again, same message in any kind of creative process you're going through right now is, the desire to make a tangible result that you can hold in your hand or whatever. I've got my own list that's building right now, but I'm also realizing like, wait for it, not quite there. So prepping to leave this house, Jill says, after 7 years in this spot, looking at each item closely, considering my use for them, etc. Good. Very good. Re-roofing your house involves taking off the entire house, rafters and all new structure with a new dormer added, allow for a new bedroom upstairs, a new structure. Yes, perfect example. It's a renovation. It's a whole process, and there's a tangible result that you want to be there. And I could see it. Here's what happens in that situation with the astrology I'm talking about. At the end, they say, there's this one thing that you really wanted for your upstairs bedroom, but it's going to take an extra few weeks to come in. And you start thinking, well, it's going to be cold by then. Like, I can't do that. So no, just get the cheap product, and then you're never happy with it. So be careful with stuff like that when you're finishing that new bedroom up there. Simplifying my home and garden out of the city, maybe selling them and focusing on only the house. Yeah, see, it's a home and garden and potential simplification, selling, etc. Yeah, a lot of that stuff's in the air right now. Court action was initiated on the first set of eclipses. Oh, okay, I see. I won't go into that just now. Okay, very good. Well, thank you everyone for those examples. Those were wonderful. So remember also, Earth is uneven. The element of Earth, I say this a lot, but Earth is uneven. So, in our, in the material sense, if you go walking with your shoes off in nature and you're used to only walking with shoes on, it hurts your feet because you're constantly stepping on pebbles and sticks and rocks. And, the Earth isn't smooth. It's not perfectly even and balanced out there. It's kind of gnarly. So the other thing to remember is that Earth, one of the things that Earth never gets quite enough credit for is the messiness involved in Earth. That you're dealing with tangible things that people don't like to deal with. For example, I like to be more in my head reading books. And I like to, of course, I like to be in my physical, spiritual practices as well. But when it comes time to okay, let's say, for example, that we bought this house, there was just like a small koi pond, fish pond out back. And, whenever the pump on that thing, it is constantly breaking or it doesn't work or whatever, something is always happening with it. And then I have to go out there and deal with it. You know what I mean? And the muck and the stink of the little pond, which is just beautiful, but getting in there and dealing with this and pulling my hand at all of that, for me, it's I'd rather be in a YouTube chat or talking with my students or reading a new astrology text or something practicing my bhakti yoga practice or whatever. The Earth is messy. And so the other thing that happens during there's an abundance of Earth is if you've ever moved, you probably had the experience as well. When you move, there's boxes everywhere, everything's chaotic and disorganized, and you look and you're like, I thought my life was kind of I had my life was sort of together and looked nice. And then you feel totally chaotic in your head because everything is in boxes. You feel like everything you own is either half broken or kind of ugly. It's covered in dust. You're swimming among the boxes for a couple of weeks before you get everything sorted out. This kind of Virgo season, the transitional season, that things are kind of falling apart. The summer is ending. Things are, deteriorating. And there's such an emphasis on practical changes. You're going to get your hands dirty with that. You know what I mean? There's work involved with Earth that we don't always like. It's uneven ground. It hurts your feet to deal with. You know what I'm saying? So think about Earth as uneven. Also, you also have to remember that a lot of people think of the air signs as really scientific. So you think of like Gemini or something. You think, oh, that's very sciencey. They're very like mental and analytical and so forth. But actually, Earth signs have a long history of being associated with the sciences. And the reason for that is that, well, most of the materialist, paradigm, like empirical science, is based on trying to understand how things work. How does this chain of cause and effect work? And we don't, we're not exercising necessarily some mystical capacities or whatever. We're just, break it down for me. How does this bone connect to that bone, and which system, does this, and how does it all work? And it's like a mechanics operating manual. Well, Earth can be wonderful. All this energy in Earth, especially with Uranus and Saturn, can also be part of like a mood of systematic analysis and breakdown, looking at how and where things are working and not working, how to maximize, how to minimize time, energy, efficiency, output or input. So that the practical and the analytical and almost science-like cold, objective, rational way of dealing with things is going to be amplified. Now, of course, the downside of that is potentially the loss of the emotional or intuitive way of connecting with things or with people. So you have to be careful of being too sort of dry and cold, and too sort of calculated. Even I wouldn't say like the kind of cunning, manipulative qualities, but just potentially a little too dry and a little too cold-hearted. So whatever changes you're going to make, you can use brilliant, mental, analytical qualities. You can break things down, figure out how things work. There'll be a lot of that kind of energy in the air. Just remember that you have a heart, you have a soul, and ultimately, we can change the material world endlessly. And the material world itself is constantly changing. And yet, remember what ancient mystics said to us, which is that material world is a series of changes that happens endlessly in cycles. And the spirit soul comes to this realm to enjoy itself, but has a hard time doing so because nothing here lasts. It just keeps changing. That the eternal soul is eternal and therefore desires connection with eternality itself. That's where it can find connection to eternal happiness. So as long as we're pursuing happiness in things that just kind of come and go all the time, as the material world is constantly doing, we're never really fully happy. So just remember, whatever modifications you're making in the world, they will not ultimately satisfy you. They may aid in helping you do things or live life in a way that could be satisfying, but they will be an assistant in a spiritual process, because no material modification that we could possibly make will sort of scratch that itch, So remember that in the meantime, because one of the things that Earth commonly makes the mistake of is thinking, if I just modify things in the material world to my liking, then I'll be happy. If I understand how things work and how to maximize, how to get the most money, or how to have more time or whatever, but then you're left with, well, how to use the money or how to use the time, and then how do we use it? Often poorly, which leads us back into a cycle of loss and then having to remodify everything so that we can start to feel better again. So it cycles like that endlessly. And Earth is particularly prone, the Earth element is particularly sort of susceptible to thinking, again, changes in modification will lead me to happiness, lasting happiness. Modifications of material nature don't ever stop. They keep going. So good thing to remember with so much in Earth. Okay, so that's what I have on my list for today. I think I covered everything. So I will take questions if anybody has them. Let's see. I'll read some more comments here too. Isabel said, had a job interview in the middle of the retrogrades, hoping to move to the West Coast for 2 to 3 years, hopefully implementing over fall and winter. Yeah, that would be a big one, wouldn't it? That definitely start to see that coming through. Ra, hey Ra. Creative project now in the hands of big producer. Eclipse sextile, my 5th house sun. Nice. Yeah, you see that there's that, and that there's, what am I going to make? What am I going to do? That feel how strong that'll get in the next couple of weeks. And even if it's something simple, like I'm going to clean out my attic, or I'm going to remake my website, or I don't know what, but I mean, just notice the desire to restructure or make sort of sweeping systematic changes, and the the feeling like I have to act on this impulse to be really strong. All right. How can we add the water energy? Okay, good question, Esther. Yeah, I mean, for me, adding water energy is tantamount to taking small breaks throughout the day, especially when I'm in high productive mode, like let's be productive, let's do things. Taking breaks throughout the day where I can sit down with non-goal oriented, I have a non-goal oriented mindset, and I just want to connect with God, for me, or the divine, or do you like the universe, whatever you'd like to call it. That's very important for me. That might be prayer, that might be sacred scripture, that might be a walk with my dog, that might be a little time to journal, or for sure for me every day meditating, chanting, and practicing yoga. But I drop doses of that throughout my day, because that's my heartbeat. That's that. In my opinion, that's the something like that is. You could say is like adding water to the earth. It's the earth has the potential to just get in that high productivity mode and not take time to bring the heart into it. So the spiritual practices where you take time to be in listening mode and receptive mode, and non-goal oriented mode, it brings fluidity back into the picture when you go back to work. You'll be a little bit more thoughtful about how you're working or how you're handling that earth energy. So that's how I would do it. But it's very important not do it just once a day, right? Sometimes people say, well, I meditated and I'm done. But what we're really looking to do is make our life a prayer, make our life a moving meditation. How do we do that? Well, we can't do it unless we keep coming back to it. It's like, right now, there's a little baby in our house, right? It's very similar. The desire that I have to go and hold her, to be with her, to look at her, to, just feel that little life in my arms, so that I keep wanting to go back to it. I keep wanting to go back to it. Well, part of that very practically is because, well, she's a new little baby and I'm a parent and all of that. And everyone is like that with their parents for the most part. But it's also spiritually, because we crave that kind of connection. She's doing nothing for me. Right? She can't talk. She can't give me anything. She really is primarily, it's about her needs right now. But why is it that in my heart, all I want to do is satisfy those needs? It's because the natural disposition of the soul is to be a servant. And we serve things all the time, whether we want to or not. Some people are like, I'm not a servant, I'm the boss. But not really, because most of our lives are lived in service to our whims, our desires, our unconscious stream of thought. We're always in service. We're always serving, usually in ways that are very unconscious. We're giving ourselves fully to things that we aren't aware of. So that's the natural inclination of the soul, is to give itself to something or someone, and to look for satisfaction in what we give ourselves to and what we give our full attention and time and energy to. And being productive without having some deep feeling of being in service to something that fills us up with that love and sweetness, like taking time throughout your day to go back and just hold that little baby again. If you're not coming back to that kind of feeling of being in service to something that fills you up with love and joy, you'll be bankrupt very quickly. You'll be as productive as you want, but it'll burn you out. So that's how I would think about that. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone hanging out. Another question from Sandra: how to balance my excessive water in my chart? Yeah, so I mean, sometimes, here's another example. I was talking to someone earlier today about this. Sometimes people say, I don't like anything regimented in my life, because I find that my intuitive, like the quality of my experience when I live intuitively, is the best. Like, I don't want anyone to tell me to meditate every day or to follow some kind of religious or spiritual structure or guidelines or rules or anything like that, because it stresses me out. I just like to go with the flow and do my own thing. Fair enough. That may be like someone, like, let's say, who has a lot of water, may feel that way. But on the other hand, to protect the, like, let's say you're a very, you're someone who finds sweetness in your heart in a very intuitive way. You just kind of flow through life, finding it, or whatever. But often enough, when it's easily found, it's easily lost. As you can, with water, we can naturally connect to something. It can fill us, and then it can easily pour right back out. So, having structures in our life that we go back to. For example, one of the things that meditation does over a long period of time is it guarantees that there's a reservoir of that sweetness in your life that can't be easily lost. Because when you meditate every day, well, sure, not every day you're going to be flowing through life and feeling full, but you won't lose what you've built either. You won't naturally drain off and lose momentum or eagerness or excitement or the remembrance of your spiritual practice. You will not as easily lose the ground that you've covered spiritually. So sometimes water needs regimentation in order to protect, let's say, the intimacy that it would like to naturally experience without any kind of regimentation. But the regimentation, the discipline is not there to enforce, but to protect and to hold, so that you can conserve and preserve the sweetness. So that's one way of thinking about it that I was just talking to someone about this morning. So hopefully that helps you a little bit, Sandra. That's just one idea, one way of thinking about it. All right, so I'm going to go, speaking of that, and go hang out with my little daughter. So I hope you guys are having a great day today, and I hope this was interesting for everyone. Take care. Bye.